Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, November 6, 2019. It is the promised post-election show, Wednesday, the day when we bring Greg Dworkin back, and also we've got Joan McCarter on tap. I can't imagine what they have to talk about. There wasn't much news from the elections last night. Everything pretty much stayed exactly as it is. Status quo, right? No changes. I don't think there was anything big. Of course, we'll be rounding those up. Rounding up the writing about what it means, rounding up the bad writing about what it doesn't mean, or it's good writing about what it doesn't mean. It's bad writing about what it's supposed to mean, but people putting their own spin on it. It's been really interesting to watch. People conservatives try and wring some good news out of this stuff. It didn't happen. The good stuff pretty much happened on our side. Big news locally. Many of you have seen, apparently several thousand of you have seen or circulated my notice to you of it. Julie Briskman, the woman, I guess, who previously was most famous for flipping off Donald Trump on his way out of the Trump National Golf Course back to the White House while she was riding by on her bicycle, ended up losing her job as a result of expressing herself under the First Amendment. That can happen, private action or whatever. But at any rate, she's got a new job now. She's been elected to the County Board of Supervisors for the district that includes the golf course, of course. And lots of people just waking up to this news. Of course, if you've been listening to the podcast, following my Twitter stream, you would know that already, and you were up to speed on the fact that, that's my local person. This is actually the first time. Here's a Virginia as blue state, emerging blue state narrative for you. When I moved here, and this was in ancient times, 19, as a matter of fact, 1995, I guess. This was a fairly strong Republican area. And I think for most of the time that I was here, I very often had Republicans top to bottom in my elective offices representing the area, with a few scattered Democrats in there from time to time, and occasionally, Democratic governors of Virginia. But that's during the swing period. But it was a pretty Republican area out here. And I believe I'm pretty much top to bottom Democrats now, with the notable exception of the presidency, still in the hands of Doter J. Trump, allegedly. But other than that, I've got two Democratic senators. I have a Democratic member of Congress for the first time in all of those years. We were represented by Frank Wolf here for decades, and that has finally changed. We now have Jennifer Wexton in the House of Representatives for us. Got a Democratic governor of Virginia. Have now a Democratic senator, a Democratic delegate to the Legislative Assembly as well. That's a relatively new thing. Actually, both of those are relatively new things, but we've held those. They aren't brand new. Those are blue holds, but also local elections as well. Julie Briskman unseated a two-term Republican supervisor who held that seat and was a fairly robust Donald Trump supporter. I think she was trying to back off of the Donald Trump support as she faced her own reelection, but she was out there on the campaign trail locally for him in 2016, and she has paid the price, and she is out. I have Democratic school board member now. I have Democratic members on the Soil and Water Conservation Board. It's pretty much top to bottom, so big swing. This area has changed dramatically, and it was easy to see if you happen to live it daily. Well, the yard signs told you the story. No one believes me, but it's true. I think I'm still waiting on results on some of the other the county elections, Commonwealth's attorney, et cetera, et cetera. I don't really put them in in the hierarchy of direct representation, but I do vote for those things. But we had a close result in that yesterday, and I think I have to wait for those. But there we have it. Julie Briskman has a new job coming, I guess, in January, and it has made national news because it's just such an interesting story. Everyone who saw that picture remembers the picture, and it's a fascinating, I don't know what you would call it, kind of story. I would say rags to riches, but it doesn't have anything to do with riches. And, you get the sentiment, though. She was down and out briefly, and now living on top of the world. I sent that tweet around yesterday, letting people know, guess who will now be the county supervisor for the district that includes Trump National. It's Julie Briskman, and that has been shared rather briskly. About Briskman, several thousand likes and retweets. Just by the way, if you're listening to the show or sharing that tweet around, I hate to get right back on the horse about these things, but the truth is that she'll be running for re-election in 4 short years, and we'd hate for it to be a flash in the pan. It was actually a little more difficult for her to raise money than I expected, given her national profile, but she did do fine, spent the money well, has won the seat. If you're in the mood for giving her retweeted congratulations, you might also check in on her Twitter profile, which is included in my tweet, which takes you to her webpage, which takes you to her Act Blue donation page, and say, congratulations, here's $5 of congratulations so that you can stay in office next time and maybe move on up the ladder at some point in the future once you're a little bit more experienced and we all get familiar with you. That's not a bad thing to do. Better than just plain congratulations. But, just plain congratulations has got to feel good, too. I like the fact, I'm glad I included her Twitter handle in that, not only because I wanted her to see it, but I would love for her to wake up and scroll through. I'm sure her Twitter feed is through the roof and she can't see it, but I hope that sprinkled in there are a couple of the notes of congratulations from people retweeting my tweet, because they would be really inspirational and really let you know that it was time well spent the last couple of months working so hard, because people tweeting congratulations along with, this made my night, this is the best story I've ever seen, there is a God. I mean, you got to be proud of yourself when you see results like that coming in from all over the country. So I'm hopeful that she's seeing those this morning. I'm sure she's seeing the Washington Post reporting on the story. I actually probably don't have to. I might skim through it later on, but it pretty much says everything that we just said here. So there you have it. Good news. And she'll be an elected official next time she decides, if she decides to spend time at the entrance to Trump National again, if he decides to truck himself in this weekend. All right. Greg Dworkin is here. You were elected vice president last night, I believe. So congratulations to you.
No, but I was elected to round things up. By the way, You need to check your mic connection because you fade in and out every once in a while.
Okay. Well, it's me passing out.
Yeah, but you can do that while I pontificate.
How about if I do? Go ahead.
Okay. So the thing about these elections last night is that they really make people who don't normally care, pay attention. And they make you pay attention to other people that do. Oh. And that's a good thing because it's catching.
Yeah. Well, there were a lot of people who really found that their faith was restored yesterday, and that's nice.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that I posted Ode to Joy today on Daily Kos has nothing to do with it, right?
Right.
But, a lot of big things happened. And, of course, the best and sweetest of all of this is Donald Trump's own tweet, where when he went to the rally for Matt Bevin and rallied Democrats to come out and vote against him, he said to the crowd, you got to vote because if you lose, it sends a really bad message. It just sends a bad – and they're going to build it up. You can't let that happen to me, he said. And we made it happen to him, we said. And so, of course, the next morning, given that Matt Bevin lost in Kentucky, and granted Matt Bevin was uniquely unpopular, but you know who else is uniquely unpopular?
Well, I suppose I wouldn't make it unique necessarily, but I get your message. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Trump. So what happened there is that whereas Republicans across Kentucky did okay, and in fact hit their polling marks, Matt Bevin underperformed. And the reason he underperformed is because there was a pretty high turnout And people in the Cincinnati suburbs, which are Kentucky-based, that is to say, just across the bridge from Cincinnati,
Covington
are the
Catholic
Kentucky
area.
suburbs in Kentucky. And they voted for Steve Beshear, or Andy Beshear, Steve Beshear's son.
Well, they voted for him,
I'm
too.
old. I keep doing that. So Bevin lost. Trump
too.
lost. And as the Washington Post sums up today, Democrats claim a victory Tuesday because, of course, Bevin will contest it because he's a Republican and claim that there was voting suppression or voting fraud or something because,
all that stuff.
Too many people voted for Democrats. Democrats claim a victory Tuesday in Kentucky's gubernatorial race, as well as the Democratic takeover of the Virginia state legislature, left Republicans stumbling and increasingly uncertain about their own political fates next year, tied to an embattled and unpopular president. So the enablers, of course, are on Twitter this morning, not trying to spin this as a win, but for example, in the case of Hugh Hewitt, we're saying what this means is that Republicans absolutely positively have to tie themselves tighter and tighter and tighter to Trump.
Okay, that's good advice. You should absolutely do it.
Right. And I think that what they should do, of course, is have more rallies. I think the rallies should rate. I think they should have a marathon.
Yeah.
I think they should have one of these telethons that go all day.
Why not?
Because clearly it worked for us. So
yeah,
I'm pretty happy about that.
I'm
right,
pretty
so,
pleased with
So
the
here's
results.
exactly what he said 3 hours ago. Message from last night to Republican election professionals. Every GOP candidate on the ticket statewide in a real Donald Trump state and almost everyone in a blue state has to put arms around POTUS and squeeze through 2020. The MSM, mainstream media, of course, is missing this. But what Hewitt is missing is that is exactly what Matt Bevin did. He knew he was losing, even though he claimed he was winning, and then therefore said, well, you have to vote for me because this is all about Trump and impeachment. And he lost.
Okay.
So why you have to wrap your arms around him in order for you to lose? Well, here's the Washington Post dealing with Virginia, because now there's a blue Virginia. Republicans awoke Wednesday to a stark new political reality in Virginia after losing majorities in both chambers of the General Assembly, a sweeping defeat that solidifies Democratic control over the state capitol for the first time in a generation.
Yes.
Depleted by President Trump's floundering approval rating in Virginia. You notice all of these are not being particularly kind to Trump. It's funny because after election, all of a sudden, the media is permitted to write what's really been going on. He's been unpopular, but now they could say he's floundering. Now they can say, that Republicans are stumbling and increasingly uncertain. That was true yesterday and the day before and the day before that, but now they can say it. Depleted by President Trump's floundering approval rating in Virginia, the Republicans' defeat was a new low for a party that has not won a statewide race since Bob McDonnell became governor in 2009. So Virginia is blue. And you pointed out what it was like when you first moved here back in the day compared to now. But I'm old enough to remember when, the macaca moment happened. And Virginia was, in fact, a very red state that elected red politicians.
Yes.
And, of course, Northern Virginia has changed. There's a lot of influx of new people. Supposedly, one interpretation of this is Jonathan Martin tweeting the New York Times reporter that Northern Virginia has a bunch of new people moving in, changing the state, whereas the what is it, the southwest corner, where the natives live, that's where Republicans come from and still represent, the old Republican, very conservative areas. I don't know if that's really true. That's his take on it. I think a better take was Dante Cini looking at what happened in Kentucky and wrote that the swing in the middle suburb counties in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin won Trump the presidency in 2016. And given what happened in Kentucky, those flips last night to the Democrat should be a serious warning sign for the White House about 2020. And what he means by middle suburbs, this is an American Communities Project designation. There are exurbs, rural areas.
Yeah.
There are inner suburbs that are close to the city, of course, urban areas. And then between the inner suburbs and the exurban suburbs, the exurbs, are the middle suburbs. And these generally exist only in the Northeast and Midwest. And they're home to about 16 million people. They have an average education level. About 25% of the population has at least a bachelor's. People living in middle suburbs seems to have better access to health care than other community types. And only 7% of the population lacks insurance. The middle suburbs are safe places, reporting 110 fewer violent crimes. And in addition to low crime rates, these places enjoy an elevated sense of community, 3 additional membership associations per 10,000 people than the national average. I live in a place like that. And these middle suburbs can vote Republican. In Connecticut, where I live, we voted for Hillary and Obama and didn't vote for Trump. But it's like, 53-47. It's not something that is overwhelmingly Democratic. And, we elect Republican legislatures to the state legislature and so on and so forth. When areas like that, as they did in Kentucky, move away from Republican candidates, then the Republicans lose. And so, again, Bevin may have been unique in that regard, but the fact that the middle suburbs were willing to consider who the candidate is and not just go negative partisan party line, and that's what happened in Alabama as well when you have a uniquely awful candidate, which is not so unique, because as you point out, if it happens to Roy Moore, and if it happens to Matt Bevin, and if it happens to Donald Trump in 2020, as we hope, then maybe it's not so unique. But
they're just unique bad apples.
But you can't just say, oh, well, we always know what they're going to do because they're Republicans and therefore we'll vote X. That's not how it works.
Okay.
There are persuadables.
Yes.
In fact, the Attorney General, who was a Mitch McConnell clone, did quite well in Kentucky. And so clearly people were switching. In other words, it isn't all negative partisanship because people voted for the Republican Attorney General and the Democratic governor. So if people are making choices, by definition, in my book, they're persuadable. So trying to get the persuadables to vote for you is a good idea. And where are those people? In places like middle suburbs.
Middle Earth.
So it's not just about turnout. Turnout was incredibly high for an off year in Kentucky and Virginia, but you had to have people switching their votes away from Republicans in order to do as well as the Democrats did.
Well, I'll take it. I guess so. We may have to wait for a day or two before Rachel Bidikofer tells us what she thinks it all means.
She thinks it was negative turnout. I mean,
yes,
negative
well,
part.
that's
she said so.
True. I mean, for her fuller analysis, apparently she's had to spend yesterday driving to Washington, D.C., and then presumably this morning driving back before she can get back to work.
Right, and at the same time, the Virginia website was down, so we didn't get granular information that we want. So we do have to wait a little bit on that. Clearly, for those people like Jesse Ferguson who say it's both, we're right, because it was probably negative partisanship in Virginia and persuasion in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think so, and we'll get her an opportunity.
Kentucky is a state that went for Trump by 30 points. It's phenomenal that a Democrat won.
Yes, that's true.
And so you can't just say, okay, well, we increased turnout. Turnout from what? It's a red state. If you increase turnout in a red state, generally who wins? A red candidate.
That is also true. And, of course, they did win statewide everywhere else on all the rest of the statewide races on the ballot. So
So Bevin was bad the way Paul LePage was bad in Maine. Mm-hmm. Now, LePage wasn't beaten. He term limit out. But, again, the candidates do matter. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, it's not automatic that these middle suburbs and persuadable voters will automatically vote for or against somebody. It's just that the way it works is that you have to have a candidate who's acceptable to them. And again, this means a lot nationally. Trump nationalized this election. One thing Rachel Bidikofer did point out is that people who didn't nationalize the election in Virginia, who were Democrats, lost.
Yes.
The ones who said, no, I want to go local issues, I'm not part of the national party, yada, 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 they didn't do well.
Yeah.
The people who said, I'm running because Trump is a unique problem and I'm a Democrat and I will fight it, they did well.
That's definitely something to take away from it, and I hope that more people do. I found it a little odd. I'll get used to her terminology for it. But yeah, I mean, some of the people who were running the supposedly non-nationalized races because they were focusing on local issues are actually focusing on issues that Democrats nationally have told them to focus on. It's a national message. It's just a terrible one.
Right.
That, what people really care about is not the abusive idiot president, but, they do care about health care, and that's true. But to campaign
true.
on it as if he wasn't a factor in all of this is bizarre.
It's insane.
And you lose. So
Yes.
you don't get to change health care.
And in 2020, Trump is going to be on the ballot, and it's going to be a referendum on him. Now, he made it a referendum on him in Kentucky. It may be that Matt Bevin was going to lose anyway. But, of course, the spin from Trump, which is so funny, is he goes down there and rallies the area that he had his rally
Yes.
To go out and vote for the Democrat.
Yes.
Right,
Essentially,
and
they
then
did.
says, well, if it weren't for me, Bevin would have lost by 15 points. I dragged him across the finish line.
Yes, that is Laura Ingraham was all in on that theme. But yeah, there were a number of Republicans insisting, oh, well, he would have been crushed. I'm the one who made it competitive, and wait till we sue and overturn it, and then you'll have a different story.
So back to the Washington Post story, because this is the message that I think we need to go with here. Bevin's attempt to nationalize his cause by stoking conservative grievances about the impeachment process was not enough to overcome his problems, nor was Trump's raucous rally for the governor on Monday, raising questions about Trump's political strength as he faces a barrage of challenges and a difficult path to re-election. Now, again, all of a sudden the media is noticing that maybe Trump's not in a great position. That's the nice thing about elections. It frees you to say what's really going on without saying, well, I don't want to be too partisan about this. Well, your side lost, and it lost by running the issues we said weren't going to help you. And they won by running on the issues that you said were going to hurt us. Remember, Chuck Todd was saying, well, what happens if the Republicans sweep
What was
Louisiana, which won't be till November 16th, and Mississippi, which the Republicans did win, and Kentucky, which the Republicans lost? What happens if the Republicans sweep all three? Doesn't that say that impeachment is hurting the Democrats? Impeachment is not hurting the Democrats.
Well, now we have that answer.
And after elections like this, it didn't hurt the Democrats in Virginia. It's not going to hurt the Democrats in Kentucky in the sense of it's not enough to overcome a terrible gubernatorial candidate. It wasn't enough to pull him across the finish line. And that raises questions, fair or not, about Trump's political coattails and political capital. And if that starts raising questions among Republicans about Trump's political coattails and political capital, that frees them to all of a sudden discover that they have a conscience after all.
All right. Well, I'm for that, if we can make it happen.
Well, again, this is a long-term thing. But if Bevin had won and Trump went around claiming the only reason he won is because I dragged them across the finish line, it'd be impossible for Republicans in Washington to break from him. But that didn't happen. The opposite happened.
Yes.
Better figure that into your analysis. So when the Chuck Todds of the world come and tell us that, Democrats have to be really careful because Abigail Spanberger has to be careful because impeachment, it's really difficult. Where? What are you talking about? What state are we talking about? Virginia? The one that just went blue?
Yeah. All right. I don't really know where he came up with that one. That one was bizarre right from the start, just because, aren't those three races
red states
that they
tend
were...
to vote? Yeah, red states tend to vote red state.
It was a very strange selection that he didn't
because,
choose any place
if you
that
have to
had
make your
anything
case that
close.
impeachment is bad for Democrats, and I've already pre-decided this.
Yes, but I don't know.
Then
Come up with
whatever
something less
data comes out,
provable.
obviously, look what happened in Kentucky. Obviously, impeachment is bad for Democrats. Look at it. Look what happened because, I don't know, but it just is.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not really sure why. He didn't need to tie himself to that, but I don't know.
Well, that's the thing.
It's
Again,
weird.
now,
He's
what
an odd guy.
political mistake did Trump make with this
When?
off-year election?
This one? Participating in it.
Right.
Yeah.
He was under no obligation to go and defend Matt Bevin.
No.
None. Okay? And so a
If he
smarter
wasn't obligated
president,
to
I don't know
defend
who
the Kurds.
pointed this out on Twitter, but Trump's biggest mistake
Yes.
was not being able to pick winners and losers properly and tying himself to a loser.
Yes.
Okay? Smart politicians don't do that. Now, he's pretty good at distancing himself after the fact. After they lose, it's like I never knew him.
Yeah, right. Oh, it was really his fault. I was trying, but he was down by 50, Right.
Right? So as Liam Donovan, one of my favorite Republican analysts, wrote, Bevan's biggest political sin was he didn't own the libs hard enough.
Yeah.
Of course,
I guess
he's sarcastic.
Okay.
And he is. He's a very sarcastic. But, look, it doesn't work. And when it doesn't work, then you scratch your head and say, okay, well, those people who are advocating this and nothing else, like you view it, maybe they don't know what they're talking about.
Could be. Entirely true. There are plenty of them this time around.
So you live in Fairfax County?
I do not.
Which county do you live in?
I live in Loudoun County.
Loudoun County, okay.
Yes.
I'm asking because Dave Rossman had this tweet yesterday. Projection, Dan Helmer, Democrat, defeats 16-year delegate Tim Hugo, Republican. He's 16-year delegate. He's not 16 years old. 16-year delegate Tim Hugo, Republican, in Virginia, HD 40. Hugo was the last remaining GOP legislator representing any part of Fairfax County at the state or federal level.
Yeah,
I mean, you're talking about a pretty big wipeout over those years.
Yes.
And so, this is going to have political repercussions for days and weeks to come. And as, again, Liam Donovan said, RIP Beltway GOP.
Yeah, pretty much. We're out to the west of Fairfax. We're on that borderline between ex-urban and middle suburbs, I would guess. And even we are sweeping our Republicans out. In addition to mine now being represented almost top to bottom by Democrats, the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors, to which Julie Briskman
has just joined.
They've flipped has always been a Republican-controlled board, and it was flipped 6-3 Republican to 6-3 Democrat. First time I've ever seen it.
Wow.
So, lots of good
recent
news
years,
like
Westchester County in New York, right outside of New York City.
All right, we'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I will toss this in after all. One last note, I guess, or maybe not last note. We'll see what happens when Greg chimes in. But here's a note on Virginia. Shannon Watts chiming in with a tweet on the subject. We did it. Everytown was the largest outside donor in Virginia, outspending the NRA 8-1. And Moms Demand volunteers outmaneuvered the NRA with over 100,000 calls, door knocks, and texts to voters. Tonight, that would be last night, we beat the NRA in their home state. That's where the NRA is headquartered. And among the many things that can be done with a now unified Democratic government in Richmond, well, coming in January, I suppose. Actual reconsideration of some common sense gun legislation, one of the lesser discussed issues, but familiar to, well, not only to us locally, but to all of us around the country. You'll recognize what's going on. The legislature can undertake to repeal the ridiculous law imposed on us by the Republican legislature forbidding municipalities and other localities from voting to remove Confederate memorials and statues. The state stepped in and said, because we believe in local governance and conservative small government, we will now forbid local governments from regulating what is and isn't an appropriate public display in your own neighborhood. Well, that hopefully will be gone shortly, and people can make their own decisions about what they want to memorialize in their hometowns.
Well, yeah, and also another big thing that's going to matter a lot is voting rights.
Yes, of
So
course.
there's a number, and of course the Virginia legislature refused to meet and deal with the gun issue. So a lot of stuff's going to change.
Yeah.
Another thing that happened, which was fun, you may remember, Republican incumbent David Yancey won a coin flip
Yes,
in order to
right.
be the delegate to the House of Delegates when it was tied with Shelley Simons, the Democrat, but Simons beat him this time.
Yes. They actually had an actual outcome to the election rather than having to draw lots out of a fishbowl or whatever. I think I've mixed my drawings there, but you got the idea. That was randomly assigned, essentially, and now people have voted, and people who forgot to vote last time said, oh, yeah, I remember. I wanted the Democrat to win.
Right. And, as far as notices closer to home, Mike Musson, who's, of course, a first-time, long-time.
Yes.
First-time caller, long-time listener, writes, I'm in HD 40, so I'm delighted by the result where Hugo lost. Hugo had been lodged here a long time. And, in fact, it's nice to know that you actually have listeners.
Yes, that's true. That's helpful and nice to know how close they are, in fact. Okay, so and I love it when, you get a story that's localized like that and somebody says, oh, yeah, that's me. I've been having that moment with the Julie Briskman thing. So
yeah, exactly
fun.
right. So the other big story, of course,
together.
that was going on is that Gordon Sondland came in and said, all this stuff that I lied about? Well, I decided to revise and extend my remarks, so I'm not really lying anymore. I hope you will take that under consideration when you charge me for perjury.
Right. I undid my perjury later on. Yeah.
Which doesn't work that way, according to the perjury parts about violating the rules of the House.
Yeah, if they really want to get you, they got you. But they could make a decision not to bother to press it.
Maybe we won't.
Yeah.
So Gordon Sondland just gave us the scandal-smoking quid pro quo, right? Paul Waldman and Greg Sargent. The House Intelligence Committee just released transcripts of testimony by Kurt Volker and Gordon Sondland, two central players in the Ukraine scandal that happened yesterday. While both accounts are full of fascinating and appalling details, the real blockbuster came in the form of an appended statement from Sondland in which he clarified his testimony on key points. For context, recall that there were two things Ukraine wanted from the U.S., $400 million in military aid that President Trump had frozen, and a White House meeting between Trump and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. In his testimony, Sondland notes that this meeting was conditioned on Zelensky agreeing to make a public anti-corruption statement, a demand that had been communicated to him by Trump personal lawyer Rudolph W. Giuliani. So I wrote in the Pundit Roundup, so that's extortion, clear as crystal. And he goes on to say, the money was part of it too. But somebody, I think it was Randall Elias, but one of the lawyers on Twitter pointed out, the distinction between bribery and extortion is really a small one. But bribery is specifically in the Constitution.
That is
true. You can't do that. So use that, because that's something you can impeach somebody over. So from now on, it's bribery.
Okay.
And whereas the Democrats wanted to call this abuse of power, betrayal, and corruption, I think abuse of power, bribery, and corruption works just as well and is a lot simpler.
Yes. That's true. And, it was a rather
it's the ABCs of why Trump has to go.
Yeah, I like the fact that it's ABC. That's very nice. By the way, did you know that Giuliani had a second middle name? I always laugh every time they remind you that he's Rudolph W. Giuliani. And I decided to look that up in case it was, Werner or Wilhelm or something. Yeah. It's William.
The W stands for Gunnif.
I guess so. But he's Rudolph William Lewis Giuliani. They never say Rudolph W.L. Giuliani. I don't know why that is the case. Yeah. They run out of letters,
I guess.
All right. I don't know. Just thought I'd throw that in there. It means nothing.
Right. Rudy Colludi works for me.
Yes, I enjoy that one a lot. I love that it rhymes.
Yep. Anyway, so Adam Schiff writing in USA Today, Trump betrayed America. Soon the public will hear from patriots who defended it, and he is going to wind up doing public hearings, and this is going to matter a lot. Meanwhile, since we spoke last, remember we were perseverating over the Siena New York Times poll. Well, 2020 Democrats lead Trump by virtually unprecedented margins in a new poll, and that's from the Washington Post, and that's big. And the thing of it is, in context with the elections yesterday, I think Democrats should feel a whole lot better about 2020 than they did on Monday after the Siena poll came out.
Yeah, well, okay. It's good to feel good about it.
New Washington Post poll,
That way
Adam
you can
Blake
work
writes,
harder.
shows President Trump trailing former Vice President Joe Biden by his biggest margin in any national poll since March, 17 points, and shows him trailing Elizabeth Warren by 15 points. Shows his deficit to Bernie Sanders, 14 points. The biggest takeaway may be that there just doesn't seem to be much difference in whom the Democrats nominate. Remember, if it's a close race, a 1 or 2 point race, those 1 or 2 point differences between the candidates matter. But if it's a 15-point difference then between they and Trump, then 1 or 2 points between the candidates doesn't matter. As Democrats anxious to, quote, just win, baby, confront some tough choices in the months ahead, which is to say we got to pick a candidate, and I haven't decided on one. I'm really unhappy with Elizabeth Warren's health care plan. There are indications that the differences among the candidates matter less and less to the final result. And let me clarify here. I mean, as Paul Krugman points out, her numbers are honest. I just think it's politically bad. That doesn't mean that will always be the case, Aaron Blake writes. It bears emphasizing swing voters may not be terribly in tune with the very liberal policies of Warren, for example, and could eventually be turned against her. Likewise, Biden's uneven campaign could make him less electable if he makes a general election. We don't know. But for now, the differences among the candidates appear to be narrowing. Early in the race, Biden was leading, but now everybody's leading. Okay, and there's another finding from the new post-ABC poll that suggests a little difference in who the Democratic nominee is. The poll asked voters whether they would be less likely to vote if any of the 3 candidates mentioned was the Democratic nominee. Among Democratic-leaning voters, about the same percentage said they would definitely vote if it was Biden, Sanders, and Warren. And there's also little difference in Republican-leaning voters, despite theories that Warren or Sanders might spur higher conservative turnout. And there's some interesting differences when it comes to age groups. The youngest voters are more likely to turn out for Sanders, and the numbers even out on balance. As we can see in the head-to-heads, the end result is becoming more indistinguishable. And that's because the 3 top candidates all lead by about the same margin among political independents. Those are the people who count the most in my book. If you want to win elections, Biden plus 15, Sanders plus 18, Warren plus 17. So indies like them all. And it might be time to confront the idea that early assertions about Biden's superior electability were largely based on name ID. That's what Rachel Bitecofer had said. And the fact that he had been vice president. As Warren has become better known, she steadily approached the kind of numbers Biden gets.
Yeah, like sensible.
Okay, and the actual campaign will matter a great deal, as it always does. And, of course, who the candidate is matters. Let's look at Matt Bevin, for example. So read what the Never-Trumpers say, take it to heart, but don't act like that's the only discussion. And then finally, for my segment today, I want to finish with something that I just find fascinating. We mentioned those New York Times Siena polls. I'll put this right at the bottom here so you could find it easy. Oops, I have the wrong link. I'll have to fix that. A sliver of the electorate could decide 2020. Here's what those voters want. And what that is Nate Cohen in the New York Times looking at those Siena polls and trying to figure out who the swing voters really are. Okay. Here's the actual article.
There they are.
Okay. The poll adds a new mix of characters to the quadrennial cast of swing voters, like a somewhat conservative college-educated suburban man who doesn't approve of the president's performance but opposes single payer, or a young man, perhaps even black or Latino, who is not conservative on policy, liberal on policy, we got him on policy, but resents his generation's stringent cultural norms and appreciates the president's defiant critique of political correctness.
Which generation is he, though? That's huge. Is he a
well,
boomer?
You know,
Look out.
They're younger. They're millennial, older
Gen
millennials.
Z?
Maybe younger Gen X, not Gen Z.
I don't know. What other Gen?
The size of that persuadable pool depends upon how they are defined, although there's reason to think some voters have more of a partisan lean than others, or that they themselves realize. Let's call the 15% who are still thinking a Trump or a Democrat the potentially persuadable. As a group, 57% male. Trump's already lost women. And 72% white, because whites are the biggest group in the country. And 35% have college degrees. So these are persuadable voters. Most, 69%, say they usually vote for a mix of both Democratic and Republican candidates. That's what people do around here where I live.
Very strange.
Among those who voted in 2016, 48% say they voted for Trump, 33% for Clinton, 19% for Gary Johnson or Jill Stein, or no one.
Really?
Those who voted in the midterms voted for the Republican congressional candidate by 1 point. So they're a little bit more conservative. We'll see in a moment. As a group, they did that. These potentially persuadable voters are divided on major issues like single-payer healthcare, immigration, and taxes, but they're fairly clear about what they would like from a Democrat. They prefer by 82 to 11 somebody who promises to find common ground over one who promises to fight for a progressive agenda. And they prefer a moderate over a liberal, 75 to 19. That's not surprising, therefore, that you find out 40% of these describe themselves as conservative compared to 16% who say they're liberal, and 40% are moderate. So 40% conservative, 40% are moderate, and roughly 20% are liberal.
Okay.
And that's the group that you are trying to persuade. My argument is I don't think Medicare for All is going to do it.
That may be the case. Yeah, although I think you should spend some time sitting with them separately and say, listen, there's really not that much difference between common ground and the progressive agenda. So the idea that
part of the thing here is that they don't really pay attention to politics, and so you can hit your head against the wall a gazillion times. Mm-hmm. But there's a difference in my mind, just from a practical, clear-eyed, pragmatic way of looking at it. There's a difference between saying if our message were better and we explained it better, they would agree with us, and saying, you know what, these are really difficult people to persuade to agree with you on the issues because they don't really care about issues.
Maybe.
They care about the concept. They want to know that you're really concerned about healthcare and that they'll pay less. These are the people who fall for the, okay, if you give me more services with lesser taxes, smaller taxes, but we'll discuss the details in December, they vote for you.
Okay.
You're not going to convince them by a detailed discussion of why Elizabeth Warren's healthcare plan is better than Bernie's and actually sustainable in and of itself. That's not going to work.
No, I probably couldn't. I couldn't have that discussion with them anyhow. But on an aside, I guess the thing that worries me
I heard that Elizabeth Warren has this big healthcare plan, which is more government, and also is going to raise taxes. Yeah. So I don't know. I can't vote for her. I'm going to vote for somebody else. That's how it's going to go down.
True. But I do think there's time. There has to be one day a discussion that says, by the way, I heard that you don't like the liberal approach to things. By the way, the liberal approach to things is find out what works and then do that. What is now passes for conservative approach to things is who cares? This is what my church orders. Let's do it.
But you have to start that messaging from the beginning. You can't do it now.
No, there needs to be a discussion about that, though, because this perpetuates things. I'm pointing out that I more of the same, in terms of, I guess in shorthand, New York Times feels like they have to deal with these things quickly. But that's an ongoing problem. Note to self that work still needs to be done. People are, for some reason, scared of the words either progressive or liberal, and they no longer mean exactly the same thing. But when you say you want to find common ground, there's one party that says there cannot be common ground with anybody, and that's the Republicans. And other parties say, let's talk about things. You want somebody
that was the funny part about Matt Bevin's approach in the last weeks of the election, that he sensed he was going to lose, even though he lied about it and said he's up to 8 points and makes himself look even more like a fool. And that is that he was literally running ads saying that the socialists want to come in and elect Andy Bashir and take away everything you have, everything you hold dear. Uh-huh. And, of course, it didn't work and he lost anyway. Yeah. But, the Republicans, like Trump, for example, are going to accuse you of everything they are.
That's true, too.
When Trump says that Adam Schiff is going to make up the transcripts when he releases them, that means he made up his transcript when he released it. Mm-hmm. And when the Republicans say the Democrats are the radicals, what they really mean is that the Democrats are center-left and pretty much where the country is on the issues. Mm-hmm. And the Republican radicals are the ones who will not compromise. So that's what you're saying about how you have to approach this. But you have to start that early and pound it, and you have to hear it from everybody. You can't add that in the last week of the election and expect it's going to persuade people. The problem with Elizabeth Warren's health care plan is it's been muddled for months now, and you can't save it from this point onward by simply saying, okay, now we're going to do the messaging right. Because you haven't even done the messaging right.
Oh, well, I can't. Yeah.
What it looks like is that she was pushed into it by Bernie and then came out with it in a hurry and isn't really explaining what's going on. That's what it looks like. Okay. And I'm sorry, that's bad. politically, even though it might be, the most honest look at healthcare reform we have had yet. And it's a great service that she did that, but it's not a political winner at this point in time.
It may not be. I don't know how to advise her on that. So luckily I'm not her advisor. So
right,
that makes it easy.
It's not our job to advise her. It's her job to show us how it's done.
Yes.
And by the way,
she may know better.
ABC Washington Post new polling from Data for Progress and Civics, which works with Daily Kos, shows Warren, Bernie, and Biden all up against Trump in swing states by about 4 points.
All right.
So, it's guess what? Do you know why they call them battleground states or swing states? Because generally they're close.
Yes.
So the fact that we find out that they're close should not be a cause for alarm, concern, or anything else. It's, we knew it's going to be close. We know it's not going to be easy unseating Trump. It's always difficult to get rid of an incumbent. But we're doing okay.
Yes. So far, so good.
So good. So that's my message for today. I just think there's a couple other things that we should really throw in there. For example, CNN notes rulings against Trump on his tax returns may be tough to reverse.
Yes.
Right? Last month, during a second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals hearing, Trump lawyer Will Consovoy told the appeals court justices that even if the president shot somebody on Fifth Avenue, he could not be subject to any state criminal proceedings while in office. So the Second Circuit sidesteps such hypotheticals. We have no occasion to decide today the precise contours and limitations of presidential immunity from prosecution. That makes it less likely to go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court doesn't have to take this case out. They can just say no.
They don't have to. But it'll be difficult to avoid. I think you only need 4 votes to take it up, and they probably could produce that if they want to. They might not.
The person who wrote the opinion, Katzman, grounded Monday's ruling in the 74 landmark decision in U.S. versus Nixon, which declared the president cannot be shielded from a criminal investigation. Katzman emphasized the importance of grand jury work, state investigation, especially in this situation involving Trump's business rather than his activities in office. So Monday's ruling followed last month's decision by a Washington, D.C.-based U.S. appeals court robustly interpreting Congress's oversight power. So the point of all of this is that this is a narrow ruling. It's well within the scope of precedent. And unless the Supreme Court is willing to jump in a political year and basically say Nixon was wrongly decided, that's going to be bad news for Republicans in 2020. I don't think that's what the American public really are expecting the Supreme Court to do. So more likely than not, because it's a well-grounded, well-written, narrowly focused discussion here, I don't think they're going to take it up.
Well, I hope
and if
not.
They do, and they vote against us and for the president here, if you thought mobilization was big yesterday, wait till November.
Okay,
People
I'll
are going
agree
to be
with
very
that.
pissed about that.
I should think so. It would really reveal an awful lot. It would reveal the truth about things. And like, I think another way of saying it is, I think that most of the justices would like to continue hiding the ball.
Yes, they're not stupid.
They're
highly political, and they love hiding the fact that they're political.
They're
but
highly
they're not
educated.
dumb.
Yeah, they've been through a lot of schooling. Some of them don't remember it, I guess, but, either because they never really paid attention or they were blackout drunk or whatever,
If they did take the case, I see 5-4, we win, and Justice Roberts gets everybody mad at him again.
That could be. That's the sort of thing. It would be extraordinarily dumb to take, because that would be the most sensible outcome, unless Roberts is done hiding, which I don't think he is. He'll be working very hard on the 4.
He's an institutionalist like Bill Barr isn't.
Yeah.
And I think that the legacy of his Supreme Court is on the line with something like that.
Yeah. His position.
You're going to go down in the history books as the person who overturned Nixon.
Yeah. Not wise. I'm sure he's working hard to persuade them. There have to be persuadable votes there too. You don't want this. This is an annoyance. This can't come out. Even if you win, quote unquote, take this case and quote unquote win this case, it'll be a huge flashpoint. It'll be attention on us like we never wanted. And if you don't take it, most people don't realize the mechanism by which we do and don't take cases. It'll just be, look, it never came to us. We couldn't do it.
Right. That's the safest thing to do. So I think that's what they'll do. And then finally, to finish up, an observation from the Bulwark from Benjamin Parker, that we have to be careful in a good way of not looking at events of today, Schadenfreude today, the Zeitgeist today as being what it's going to be in a year. That is to say, it's a dynamic and not a static evolution. What do I mean by that? Just look at the headline here. Remember, Trump just gets worse.
Yes.
The president's supporters have grown accustomed to defending the indefensible, but every day, every week, every month, he does something worse than the month before. If you're talking about the Supreme Court looking at the political environment and trying to weigh what's going on here, by the time it's up to them to decide, Trump's going to do worse things. Impeachment's going to be going on. We're going to have had public hearings. All of that's going to influence them. Because in that environment, to then go ahead and say, okay, Nixon was wrongly decided, that's explosive.
Yes. All right. Well, I would advise them to stay away from it. Benjamin Parker, huh? Spider-Man's uncle, I think.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. Well, good for him. He's dead.
I'm looking for the next article to have been written by Aunt May. That would be great.
Then, that's is it April already? I'm waiting for that. So April 1st, they can get around to that at the Bulwark. Okay.
Yeah, I suppose. Anyway, so that's my segment for today. I think a lot to celebrate. A lot of good things happened yesterday. And yes, it's wrong to take off your elections and extrapolate to 2020. But when doing so makes you put into focus what you should have known all the time anyway, which is that Trump is unpopular, bumbling, and what he's doing is indefensible, and just him yelling and screaming doesn't save him. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Nationalize that.
Yeah, I'm for that.
I got your nationalization right here.
Excellent. I'm ready to roll with it. And thanks for rounding things up. It was a big day and lots left on the table. Certainly plenty here for Joan as well. And it's going to be a busy end of the week.
Last one here. I'll just read this tweet from Nicholas Grossman, who I chat all the time with on Twitter. He's an editor at Arc Digital, but he's an international relations professor at the University of Illinois. To GOP senators in tight races, Matt Bevin lost in Kentucky because of his own weakness, not Trump's. But the president of the United States couldn't save him. Trump put in extra effort. It still failed. Your choice isn't to sell your soul and win versus keep your soul and lose. Might as well keep your soul.
Yeah, I mean,
because if you sell your soul and you're going to lose, you're going to lose anyway. You might as well go out looking better.
Yes, with a soul. That's, I guess, the preferred outcome, but not for, I mean, Matt Bevin, you can't just shop for a soul at the last minute, just like you can't explain healthcare in the last week of the election. You can't just go to Souls R Us and buy one. So I guess he figured, I don't have one now, I might as well go for it, and if I win, terrific. If I lose, no worse off. I didn't have a soul to begin with.
Yep.
All right.
All right, so that's the story, and I'll be back tomorrow, and maybe there'll be a little bit more, cogent and pungent and pithy analysis, so we can cover pith tomorrow.
Yeah, pungent is like punditry that's cogent.
I hate being pithless, right? If you're going to be pungent, you might as well have pith.
Right. Not only did I lose my soul, I have no pith.
Exactly. So we'll talk tomorrow, and we'll do some soulful, pithy analysis, and good luck, and say hi to John.
All right, I will do that. Well, I say that all the time, but, symbolically it'll be done.
Well, she listens.
I say hi to Joan. I say
hi to Joan, and I don't even have to depend upon you to do it.
Right.
So I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Very good. Thanks very much.
I know you mean to. I mean, just don't get around to it.
Yeah. We're distracted by events.
Yeah, squirrels. Look over there, squirrels.
Right. Okay.
Right. Okay, take care.
What? Oh, I was looking at the squirrel. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Greg. Bye. See you tomorrow. Let's see. We got a lot of other things to round up as well. Where did I see this? I'm going to have to scroll through the tweets a little bit. Here we are. Yes, Kate Sherrill reporting this bit o' news. Just one that might not have cracked the surface where you are, but since we were trying to elevate some of the interesting localized stories, the election results in the Kentucky suburban counties around Cincinnati, etc. By the way, I did blurt out as Greg was saying it that remember the kids from Covington Catholic who came to Washington, I don't know, was it a year ago, a year and a half? I guess it's maybe it is 2 years. I don't even remember how long ago it was. And they had that confrontation outside of the Lincoln Memorial, and they were photographed making fun of the Native American protesters who were there. You remember those guys. They are suburban, Cincinnati suburbs of Kentucky is where they're based. They are, as it happens, the school itself is over in, I guess, what's it called? Kenton County? Is that it? So I don't know how the results went there, but they're one county over from some of the places where a lot of the Bashir support was pouring in from. So I thought that would be worth pointing out. But another, besides that, and the Julie Briskman story and the Hugo story, Kate Sherrill brings us this one, a tweet from Politics Video Channel, with which I am not familiar offhand. But anyway, breaking news, Democrats just made history, and it's in all caps, both breaking and history. Democrats just won control of the city council in Columbus, Indiana. That sounds promising, right? But leave it to them. They actually continued tweeting in the same message here and explained exactly what that means. That is the first time, not only the first time that Columbus, Indiana voted Democratic in 38 years, it is also the hometown of Vice President Mike Pence. So that's nice news as well. I don't know if we can extrapolate that to anything larger. It's just one of those little anecdotes that makes you feel good about the way things came out. And certainly every possibility in the Rachel Bidikofer negative partisanship model that people came out and said, yeah, I'd like to deal a blow to Mike Pence. I'd like to be careful how you say that. I'd like to send him a message and say, I reject Republicans because of him. That certainly happened a lot around here. There were actually, as I mentioned or hinted at earlier, there were Republicans. I can't say I considered voting for them, but I felt bad about voting against them. But I really, really wanted to send that message. I will vote for none of you, and my neighbors won't either. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Just before we get into the rest of the show, just by way of clarification, I will say this. So I mentioned that we had some longtime incumbents in the county positions here of controller of the revenue and county treasurer. And they've been around for, a long time and are generally viewed, I think, as generally non-crazy Republicans, whatever that's supposed to mean, and the and competent technocrats who, I'll put it this way. I have spoken occasionally with someone who is a otherwise reliable Democrat who professionally has some relationship with I can't remember whether it was the Office of the Treasurer or the Controller of the Revenue, but they work very closely together. And just pointing out, these guys are competent technocrats. They've put together a system that works fairly well in keeping the books in order. And this person was trying to convince me, it's actually somewhat dangerous, in a sense, to just switch horses midstream on these guys. These are not ideological Republicans. They're simply technocrats. They happen to have come up through the Republican machine, but they're doing a good job keeping the books sane, in order, balanced to the extent that it's their job to do so. And there's no ideological reason to change direction. And I considered that. We'll say that much. Another instance in our fight for our election for Commonwealth Attorney, the local DA, essentially, if you don't have the exact same terminology, you might be using district attorney or state's attorney or something like that. Anyway, our county prosecutor also, I don't know how she is ideologically, but I will say this. I had some personal experience with her. I've seen her appear to speak in various venues where I've been in attendance for other reasons. And, just generally a reasonably competent person, I think. But the question is, that's a slightly more ideological position, making all those decisions about prosecutorial discretion. Whose hands do I want that in? But, she's a nice enough lady, and I've met her a couple times. And she was actually outside my polling place yesterday. And I think I fooled the locals a little bit. I arrived, and you know how you get ambushed on the sidewalk there. And whichever group reaches you first is pushing literature on you and whatever. I was pleasant to the Republicans who came up first and offered hands, and I figured no reason to be unpleasant about things. I don't have to vote for them. I can shake their hands, whatever. And I went on in. They offered me a sample ballot. I said, no, I'm pretty sure I know what I'm doing on this. The Democratic folks approached me as well and offered me a sample ballot. And likewise, I said, no, I've got it. I did my studying beforehand. And the guy offered up, well, they don't designate on all of the races who's the Democrat and who's the Republican in there. And this will help you figure that out. But I said, yeah, I've done my homework. I know who's who in the races, but thanks. Save the paper for somebody who doesn't know, and then you won't run out later when somebody really needs guidance. And some in the Republican crowd shouted out, he's an educated voter. He knows what he's doing. Like, I think they thought that I was reliably Republican because I had stopped and just said hello and shaken hands with them. But to their surprise, I and the rest of the precinct went in and voted the other way. So anyway, I thought that was interesting to some extent. But I considered for the first time in a long time, are there Republicans that I could vote for? But ultimately, and it really didn't take me very long to come around to this, is I said, you know what? I do feel bad about some of these people. They are, in some cases, competent technocrats, and in some cases, maybe even just they're ideologically different from me, but doing a good job. And, don't I want to be the kind of person that finds common ground? And ultimately, I said, you know what? I hate to do this, but you're on Team Trump, ultimately. And you should feel the pinch. You should feel the drag on your electability that Donald Trump creates, even if you have nothing to do with him, even if you're a never Trumper. If you continue to run on Team Trump, that's a message I need to send to you. And that's the way I voted. And it's not really different at all from the way I usually cast my ballots. It's just, I just wanted to point that out, that this time, even in the middle of all this, there were Republicans who were able either directly or through surrogates to make the case to me that it wouldn't have been such a terrible thing to split my ticket a little bit. But this was a messaging election, and I went very specifically to send that message, and I think hopefully it was received loud and clear. I don't actually know offhand yet what the results were on some of those races, although I do think, I don't know what happened in the Commonwealth's attorney race. I'll have to look that up, and maybe during a break I can grab that. But I think the Commissioner of Revenue and the Treasurer, the Republican incumbents, did win. They're just sort of institutions. It's not the worst thing in the world, particularly if they are, in fact, not Trump supporters. But I was pretty clear on our county supervisor being a Trump supporter, though she tried to disguise it. So that was a definite no. Even if it hadn't been Julie Briskman running as the Democrat, there would have been no question as to what I would have done there. Anyway, just thought I'd throw it out there. I don't think anybody ever really thought that my vote was winnable for Republicans, but I do want to let you know that I did briefly consider this thing. And so out there among the rest of the electorate, where people really were more serious about possibly considering Republicans, they too are likely changing their minds and sending messages instead. Okay, let's see. Is this more localized news? I like it. This is a good idea, collecting this stuff from our friend with the slightly more embarrassing to read on the radio handle than the rest of us, but only slightly, Left-Leaning Cock, who says Dorothy Dow, D-O-W-E, defeated the Republican incumbent to flip Greenville, South Carolina's. I'm used to Greenville, North Carolina, but Greenville without the extra E, I guess, South Carolina's city council towards Democrats too. So that's pretty cool too. Not only just a win, but a win that flips control. Is that right? Dorothy Dow, according to the Greenville News, has soundly defeated Republican incumbent at-large councilman, so the whole city there, I guess, at-large councilman George Fletcher in Tuesday's Greenville city council election. So there's a whole story there. Let me include that, or at least open up the tweet. Maybe I can include the story in case you all want to read that. Let me bookmark it, put it in Pocket, and we'll throw it into the roundup. That's not ordinarily something that we need to do with things that are, well, I think everybody grasps it, but maybe you'd like to revel in it just for a little while, right? Okay, so thanks for that news. Anybody else? Feel free to chime in with your local election success story, because I think that that's one of the fun things about rounding this stuff up is it's happening everywhere, and you get the sense that it didn't just happen in the news somewhere else. And I wish we had something like that. If you do have something like that, share it. And if you don't have something like that, take heart, because you can have something like that in the next election. If these, I guess that's the purpose of these stories. If it can happen there, then it can happen anywhere, even though it may very well be the case that people in Greenville, South Carolina say, if you had spent any time in Greenville, South Carolina, you would have expected this. It's good news, but you would have expected it. Well, I haven't spent any time there, and so I'm just happy. I'm just happy to hear about it, I guess. Let's see. Other things in need of discussion before I dive into Pocket or welcome Joan to the show. I don't know how busy she is today. She could be overwhelmed, but she hasn't said so. So I think she's looking forward to celebrating some of this stuff. Here is a random tweet. David Farenthold, always a good stop if it's random. I had never heard this before, he tweets. Trump's frequent stays at his own properties are exhausting Army bomb techs who go there to protect him. I think we all probably guessed that would be the case between them and the Coast Guardsmen who guard Mar-a-Lago and Secret Service people who have to try and find all the Chinese spies and massage parlor owners or whatever else they have to try to sort out, or maybe let them in. I don't know. This is Farenthold tweeting in reference to the tweet of Jared Keller, identified here as deputy editor of Task and Purpose, as well as contributor to New Republic and others. Let's see. Yeah. And I think as Task and Purpose is, if I recall, is that a military publication? Yes. News, culture, and analysis by and for the military community. Okay. So check this tweet out. In particular, Trump's time at Bedminster and Mar-a-Lago are a growing drain on Army EOD resources. And there's a whole thread that goes with it. Do we want to see the whole thread? Do we want to go to the article? I don't know. Let's see. What is it? How's the thread begin? New EOD techs, and I guess those are the bomb techs. Looks like it in the picture here. The guy's dressed like, green versions of Minions, I guess, with those bomb suits on. Anyway, EOD techs are stuck between plummeting recruitment levels. To be honest, is that not the hardest recruitment job in the world? Bomb techs? I mean, you would think, but there are brave people out there who want to do that stuff. EOD techs are stuck between plummeting recruitment levels and skyrocketing workloads, which won't help anything, as they are forced to guard domestic VIPs without additional time for training. Not comfortable position for them, I am sure. Maybe an article that we ought to read, but I'll just get the news to you this way using his tweet thread. In particular, time at Bedminster and Mar-a-Lago, a growing drain on the resources. This one he illustrates with a clip from the article. That'll save us some time. There's a highlighted piece here. Do we read the whole thing? We'll just read the highlighted piece. Trust him. In fiscal year 2014, the enlisted techs battalion conducted 25 VIP missions. The text said. By fiscal 2019, remember that was 2014, by 2019, that number jumped to over 130 VIP missions, 11 of which were for Trump properties, with teams from the Techs Battalion conducting 6 rotations at Trump Tower in New York City. I'd really like to get the fuller context of this one day, but you can just tell. I mean, we can't spend all day on this particular story, but it really is pretty amazing. one or two more tweets in this thread here. This comes as recruitment levels for Army EOD positions have collapsed in the last decade. The last major bump in recruitment came after the Hurt Locker came out, which, well, LOL, okay. But yeah, it looks like Army EOD recruits, the peak here seems to be 2010 with 1,283 recruits actually signing up. You give me this job of defusing bombs. And now we're down about the lowest levels. I don't know if I can, I'll have to enlarge this so I can read the chart. It looks like 2016 was a crappy year for that. And we're about just slightly above that recruitment number. 2016 looks like the recruits fell in the neighborhood of about, I'll say, 225, reading roughly off of this graph. Recruits in 2019, likewise, about 230, 250 maybe. Slight bump in 2017, putting it just over 300. But yeah, we're down about 1,000 recruits a year. That's, I think, seems fairly serious. Now he gives me the too long didn't read. You should do that up top, but then you don't realize how long it's going to be. Army EOD tech spending too much time protecting bigwigs, not enough time training for combat missions. Great work by Task and Purpose, I'll believe it. Editorial intern David Rosa. Good job for that. For patiently writing and reporting this bad boy. I'll join in all frank congratulations there with Jared, who would know a lot better. I'll endorse his congratulations. It does seem like a important and relevant story, and well worth the time spent on it, as it turns out. Okay. Good eye, David Fahrenhold. Better eye. Well, Jared and, oh, dang, I already clicked away. But, do I have did I open that? I think I saved that article, right, for all of you to read, or no, maybe not. Oh, well, anyway, great job, great work, Task and Purpose. I really feel like I was David Rosa, was that the name? Hope I got it right. Okay. All right, now over to Pocket, as well as the old Twitter feed from yesterday. Other things that need or require more discussion. Let's see. This I can close. The Hill reporting from where? Who's giving them the real reporting? Kurt Volker, apparently, according to his deposition transcript, which also came out, and which I think I saw that Empty Wheel was just beginning this morning on sorting through. I guess she spent most of the day on Sondland. Sondland was all over the place yesterday. Of course, the biggest news out of that one. Oh, yeah, there was a quid pro quo. I forgot about that. I forgot to mention that. And so there you have it. You have caught me and the president red-handed on that one. That was the big news. No one got through Volker's transcript yesterday. There was just too much, or maybe it came out later. Empty Wheel saying she's finally starting on Volker's testimony. She begins by saying, is it my imagination, or is he going to need to correct the record as well, especially in light of the texts he provided belatedly? And it sounds like he may have to do that. So much the worse for Team Trump, because I think that one of the fallback positions from the Sondland bombshell was, well, he must be making things up and lying because Volker hasn't revised his testimony and said there was a quid pro quo. And it seems from Empty Wheel's initial response here that maybe that is something that he will have to end up doing. The readers elsewhere, rounded up by Christina Marcos writing for The Hill, say Volker was, I guess their big story was that he was pressed on why he repeatedly scheduled meetings at Trump Hotel. That's sort of an interesting and different angle on things. Kurt Volker, the former U.S. envoy to Ukraine, was pressed by an investigator for House Democrats on why he repeatedly scheduled meetings at President Trump's hotel in Washington, D.C., with other figures now at the center of the impeachment investigation. A transcript of Volker's deposition released Tuesday shows. Of course, the answer is he probably did that for the same reason that Sondland advised Yovanovitch that she should be tweeting praise of the president. Word gets back to to the president about things like that, and whether you're doing dumb things like holding your meetings at his hotel or not. I mean, he thinks those are wise things. But it doesn't say how often he did that, but I think you get the idea here that, I would imagine that State Department officials, when they're talking to other government officials about government business in Washington, D.C., probably no shortage of free meeting space available to them inside of their various agency headquarters buildings. But instead, they decided that everyone should gather at the Trump Hotel, where it would put money in Donald Trump's pocket every time one of them decided they needed to have a Diet Coke or a sandwich. Or they might not even have spent any money, but they just wanted it to get back to Trump that they were doing their meetings at the Trump Hotel. And that was supposed to, I guess, the president should infer that they were all paying him for the privilege of serving as ambassadors, which is not all that unusual as ambassadorships go. And of course, Gordon Sondland in particular paid $1 million to the inauguration fund to get that job. The inauguration fund, by the way, the easiest of the Donald Trump funds to steal from, because you don't have to actually report to the FEC how you disperse that money. I still maintain you will one day find that the majority of it went directly or indirectly immediately to Trump himself and his family. I still think you'll one day find out that they paid themselves appearance fees to show up at the big show, the inauguration itself. Can't bet a whole lot of money on that one, but if I stole it from the inauguration fund, I would be able to. Joan McCarter now joins us, I'm sure, with some interesting things to say about the election results, maybe, because you might have seen that things happened, might possibly find a bright spot or two there to talk about.
Might be a few, but yeah. Greg covered an awful lot of them.
He did, that's true. He came on first and stole all the good ones.
He did, but...
still,
that's
you're
what he
allowed to
gets
come on and cheer.
For getting here first.
Wake up early. You get the worm. Yeah. But
I know.
That's supposed to be a good thing. For birds, it's fantastic.
And birds like it. So
I guess so.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Congratulations to your friend Julie.
Yeah, that's good news, and it'll be exciting. And congratulations to my email inbox, which will not be getting requests for money for a while, I think. That's been the majority of my personal email inbox for the last 6 months has been
Virginia.
Julie in particular. I'm very heavy on her list, but it worked, so we're feeling good about that. It's nice. It makes it easy to spend money sort of next time too. If you win, it's depressing to spend money and lose, but that's the way the game goes from time to time.
Now, it's the Board of Controllers, correct?
It's the Board of Supervisors.
Board of Supervisors.
Yes. What
jurisdiction over Trump National Golf Course has the Board of Supervisors?
Well, I guess that would be zoning issues, etc. It's her district is where Trump National is. That's why she was riding her bike there. She wasn't just hanging around looking a carpetbag give him the finger. She was just, doing her own thing. So, I don't know. Let's see. Board of Supervisors, it's the local, it's our smallest local unit of government. So I guess any zoning, taxation, permitting, construction, etc. I guess you could really, F the place up if you wanted to. But, it's a place where locals, still actually play golf from time to time. So I guess you don't want to do too much to just wreck their day. But certainly if there were questions about, can I build a gigantic military base at the golf course? Well, no, that we would say no to.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not certain what. I don't think that's really in her plans to screw with the golf course. She's just actually going to kind of govern, which is nice, and that'll be fine. But what a great way to, turn things around here. We have a clear choice between her and somebody who was on stage for local Trump appearances during the 2016 campaign and since, whenever he's showed up for various functions. So, good. Couldn't be a clearer choice.
Could not be a clearer choice. And congratulations to all of Virginia.
Yeah. They've done well.
It's very exciting.
It is, and it's been a long time coming, and, well, a lot of good things can happen come January, and a lot of horrible things can be avoided. I guess I would keep an eye out for insane messaging from Republican legislators trying to sneak something through on their way out the door or attach something horrible to a must-sign bill. But I don't know. With the new...
pulling a page from Wisconsin and trying to strip the governor's power or any number of things.
Yeah. I mean, I assume he can still veto these things, and they don't have veto-proof control. So, but I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, I would be surprised if they didn't try something like that. And we'll hear some interesting news between now and January about that, and then see if it can all be reversed if something manages to squeak through. All right.
But it could mean, finally, after all of these decades, the Equal Rights Amendment.
That is true, too. I've
got to do some research on how that happens, because if I understand correctly, the deadline for getting it ratified has expired this year.
Oh.
So I need to figure out what happens with that next. But
that's
a research project for down the line.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the deadline. Did they build that into the language of the amendment initially?
I believe so, yeah. Yeah. So that's got to be dealt with. But
okay.
We can figure that one out.
Yeah, maybe we can just say, you know what, having a deadline is actually unconstitutional. So it's invalid.
There you go.
There you go. Why not? I mean, we've passed amendments over the course of 200 years before. I think the last one was it 27th Amendment, I guess. Is that right? Do I have my numbers right? But that one was
you have your numbers right, yes.
Initially ratified by the first state in the period of the founders in the 1790s, and then finally got its final necessary state ratification in the 1990s. So, but there was no deadline written into that. I don't know why you would write a deadline in. What's the difference? Is it going to be... I mean, I don't know what to tell you.
Because it's equal rights for women?
I guess. Yeah. Well, if you women can't get this done in 30 years, forget it. Like, okay. All right. Well, anyway, we'll take a look at that. More research necessary. Good point. Something to watch out for.
But, closer to home, more immediate, no messing around with Medicaid expansion for Virginia. It can happen.
Right. So good news.
And likewise, the messing around with Medicaid expansion that Matt Bevin embraced fully in Kentucky is going to be done.
Yes. Fantastic.
I talked a lot back in the day about how Kentucky was one of the real success stories of Obamacare, and largely because of Medicaid expansion. When it was Andy Beshear's father, Steve Beshear, in the governor's seat, he fully embraced Obamacare and he fully embraced Medicaid expansion, and it and Arkansas were the two states that had the biggest turnaround in insuring the uninsured, and Medicaid expansion was great there. And of course, Bevin did not want that to happen, and he fully embraced all of Trump's sabotage of the program, trying to impose work requirements. When he was sued over the work requirements, he retaliated against Medicaid population by taking away their vision and dental.
Because they were the ones that
tried to. He didn't succeed in that. He had to rescind that idea because it was so disastrous. Matt Bevin was fully on board with all of Trump's ideas to sabotage the law and to punish poor people. And that was rejected in Kentucky, which is really exciting. And something for Republicans to worry about.
Yeah, should make them nervous when they have the option to be signing on with that agenda. They should think twice about it. I mean, I don't know if they ever thought the first time, but it should worry them.
for all of them, there's the larger issue. Is that music right here?
Yes, I'm trying to keep
All
it
right.
cool.
We'll talk about the larger issue on the other side.
Okay. Well, we got a few seconds to wrap up. I play that as a 30-second warning to when we go out on the break, but it's pretty distracting. I agree. Okay. All right. Well, we'll talk about that.
It's the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals.
Is it? Okay. That's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show on Netroots Radio. Joan McCarter is still with us, and good, because you only got like 2 minutes before the break, so I'm glad you're still with us. So let's see. Good results coming in from all over the place with the elections, and just desserts served up over Bevin's meddling with healthcare in Kentucky.
Yes,
and,
trying to impose work requirements.
Yeah.
On a plan that he touted. He bragged about how it would immediately take 95,000 people out of healthcare in his state.
Fantastic. What a
That
guy.
was a plus for him.
Yeah.
Didn't happen. Yay.
That is
The
good.
courts did tie it up, so it never actually was fully implemented.
So,
Although
a lot
it
like Trump in that
probably,
respect.
there were reductions in the Medicaid enrollment because of confusion among people. Just because it's a vulnerable population already.
Yeah.
And when they hear it's going away, do they keep up with their paperwork? So
Yeah, right.
it had an
It's easy to
effect,
give
even
up.
though the courts did enjoin it. So,
Yeah.
and speaking of courts, that's what I teased going into the discussion and why Republicans need to be worried again on the issue of health care in 2020, just like they were in 2018. It can win elections for Democrats. And if the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals decides to take the Trump administration's side and rule the entire law unconstitutional, they got a problem.
Yes.
Even
think
if
so.
the Supreme Court takes it up and overturns it and decides that the law is constitutional, you can expect John Roberts to, at the very least, try to figure out a way to split the baby again, like he did the first time around with Obamacare.
Yeah, I mean, I hope he's still doing
When he said the
that.
Medicaid expansion was something that the states could take or not take, which ended up with Matt Bevin saying, yeah, we're going to impose a
Well, we're
blah,
not
blah,
gonna.
blah, blah, blah. This
Yeah.
is where we're, thanks to John Roberts.
But at least, yeah, I mean, if the other option was to go completely ideologically, as a Republican, we stand with the people claiming that it's unconstitutional top to bottom. Okay, he is walking a tightrope, and that's one of the things that gives us hope. For instance, that he will try and persuade and there still are several ideologues on the idiots and ideologues on the Supreme Court who might try to take up this case that Greg was discussing earlier out of the Second Circuit. And hopefully John Roberts still has his head screwed on a little bit, if not entirely correctly, and realizes that this is a danger zone they just don't need to be playing in. But the Trump approach to everything is we there's no such thing as you don't dare doing this.
Yeah.
You just dive right in, and people will reward us for our sense of adventure. So, okay, thankfully last night, if I guess the pessimist side of me says they don't read messages in anything. They won't change their approach to anything. We're still going to be in danger daily. The possible, the flip side of that is, that's how they got in trouble. So let's have some more of it and beat them even worse in 2020. But I just wish they would go away. I guess is it. Can we just win next year and have a pleasant time doing it in between now and then? No, you're going to be forced
it's going to be hell
daily.
between now and then.
Yes, and they're going to make it worse by getting angry, and they're going to do dumber things. And by and by we'll exact the revenge in 2020. But they're going to punish people along the way.
Because that's what they do.
Yeah. All right.
It's just going to be ugly. The next year is going to be really ugly. It helps that we can be buoyed by this election.
Yes.
But it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, and I imagine they'll come back and, maybe the takeaway for this for McConnell, for instance, watching what happened in his own state, is I now need to move, 11 judges a day before I'm knocked out.
Yeah, which I would imagine will be his reaction. I mean, it was going to be anyway. No matter what,
Yes.
he's going to move as many judges as he possibly can a day.
Yeah, that's just
Never mind
clear
that they're
priority.
breaking records for the number of unqualified judges they're putting on the bench.
Yes. Well, 2 would have been a record, but now they're...
Well, no, actually, George W. Bush, he nominated
I see.
9
9 who ended up being unqualified. Okay.
who the ABA had declared unqualified, and I think he got 3 pushed through.
Okay.
Anyway.
So 4
And
record.
so far, that was Bush over 2 terms.
Mm-hmm. Oh, right.
Nominating 9 and
succeeding with 3.
yeah.
How about now?
Trump so far has pushed 8 unqualified by the ABA judges, and 5 of them have been seated.
Okay, so breaks the record for seating them, and is 1 behind in the 2-term record for nominating them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all right, well, not a surprise, but...
Previously, Bill Clinton had... So just going back to the Clinton administration, I did a post on this yesterday. Clinton had, I think, 3. None of them were seated.
Because they were unqualified. Yes. I didn't realize that was the case.
Obama nominated none rated unqualified. Now, granted, Obama did not nominate at the pace we would have liked him to. I think had he, they would have all been qualified people.
You'd think. I suppose the door opens to accidentally nominating someone who is unqualified or something if you're moving at a certain pace.
Stuff that you don't see that the ABA interviewers dig down into and find. A lot of times it's personal interaction kind of things. Ethics questions, temperamental questions, things that wouldn't necessarily be reflected in the first vetting of their actual record as a judge.
Yeah, or whatever it was they were before,
But,
Ghost hunter.
Personnel kind of stuff comes in with the ABA.
Okay. Well, all right, so let's see. So 8 nominated, 5 through already. And that's just a specialty for this administration. But it is interesting to put that up there alongside George W. Bush. The last 2 Republican administrations have been on a tear in nominating people that are not qualified for the federal bench and putting them in anyway.
Yeah.
So,
with
not good.
Mitch McConnell doing it.
Yeah. Well,
because it's not enough for him to break the Senate. He's got to break the judiciary, too.
Yeah, well, he was in there for that purpose. I wonder whether it troubles him. I mean, he's doing it anyway, but I am curious about whether personally he's ever thinks, there are plenty of qualified people. I'd be very happy to put them in there too. I'm not backing off because I don't have time to start this process over again if I want to pack the judiciary. But, couldn't you just find somebody qualified? What's wrong with that?
I don't think so.
You think he just doesn't care?
If the Federalist Society's okay with him, he is.
I guess so. Are they embarrassed? Does anybody ever think, well, at a minimum, I wish we had picked someone qualified. That would be better. I cannot tell you whether they.
So I think it's entirely about their agenda.
I guess
and
so.
If it's somebody who's going to follow their agenda, then that's all that matters.
Still, are there a whole society? Like they
We've
should
got
all be
Brett
judges.
Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess if it were me, I'd be maybe at a meeting. I would bring up, wouldn't it be better if they were Federalist Society members and qualified? Like all of us here are Federalist Society members. Would anybody like to be a federal judge? We can make you a federal judge. Apparently, if we just put your name on the list, that's fine. So all qualified people, do you want one? Do you want to be a judge? And the people just say, no. All right, well, how about my garbage man? Okay. How about my dentist? Fine. I don't know where they're coming up with people.
It's probably because all of these people are too old, and they want the young ones. This is the other characteristic of most of these people.
Point.
They're in their 30s or early 40s.
Yeah, which is part of how they start off as unqualified. What have you done?
Right. Nothing. Have you ever tried a case? No. Yeah. Have you ever cross-examined a witness? No.
Yeah. I guess that does limit things. A lot of the qualified people are like 40. That's ancient for a judge. You might only live another 40 years, whereas 50, that's what we're going for.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well,
so that's something to keep in the back of your mind as we go into 2020. And the Senate again. How do we mitigate against this? How do we water down the damage that the Trump administration is doing to the federal courts for the next half century?
In between
that's
now
really
and 2020,
scary thing.
Much, right? True. Can impeach the judges.
I hate to be a downer, but
you have to be realistic about it. The celebration is over.
Election where we did really well.
Yeah. Well, there was as many celebratory tweets as there were tweets saying "celebrate tonight and back to work tomorrow." Lots of those. Yep. I saw them all over the place. That's realistic, and a lot of Republican reaction is going to be driven by the results too. And it may just be that their biggest priority is, all right, the clock is now ticking on us. We see the writing on the wall. We now need to do as much damage and as much looting as possible between now and then. And
I think that's very likely, and as much election interference, as much voter suppression.
Yes. Right.
They're not going to respond to this meekly. I don't think that we've seen nothing in the Republican Party to make us think that they will take a lesson from this and modify their behavior in a positive way.
No. All right. Well, so we shouldn't expect that. Let's see.
But it's going to put Susan Collins in a fun position.
Yes, that's true. I mean, she's been in trouble for a long time, and I guess she's the one taking away the biggest scare from yesterday.
It might be Tom Tillis in North Carolina. He's pretty fully embraced Trump. And things in North Carolina as late have not gone particularly well for Republicans.
True also. That's a good call there. I mean, maybe Susan Collins thinks she's done what she could do to distance herself, and she's going to have to roll the dice, and Tillis may be up at night saying, what have I done? Why did I...
Yeah.
Okay. I can buy that. That'd be great.
I think Cory Gardner's already toast. I don't think it makes any difference what he does at this point.
Okay.
Colorado.
Yeah, I hope that is the case as well. So, yeah, maybe the most nervous person or one with the biggest regrets, perhaps. That's a good guess. Tom, tell us. Okay. Well, anything that those people need to do in the meantime, nationally or with respect to the president being an impeachable felon or anything like that?
Yeah, you would think
Oh,
that
okay.
they might want to start putting a little distance between themselves and him.
Yes, especially as jurors and whatnot.
As jurors, we're going to continue to see the juror thing from most of them, I believe.
Yes. Dodging answer question.
Because
I
you can't possibly say, yeah, it's a bad thing for a president to try to bribe a foreign country to dig up dirt on his political opponent. You can't say that's a bad thing if you're a juror.
Right. You need to listen to all the evidence, which I'm also not going to do. That was Lindsey Graham's. I guess he painted himself in a corner the other day saying, well, you're not going to, if you're looking, how did he put it? If you're looking in the transcripts for evidence that the witnesses say, yes, there was a quid pro quo, and I acknowledge that, it's not going to happen. You're not going to find that. But if you did have it, that would be a bad thing. Well, guess what? We just found it. Well, I'm not going to read it, he now says. You may have found it, but that doesn't mean I have to hear it. La, 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 la. I can't hear you. I have the same position I had yesterday.
It was remarkable. And this, by the way, is the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah, how do you think they're going to spend their time on judges in between now and then? Yes, okay, well, there's your answer. I'm not going to listen. The president's a criminal. The witnesses admit as much. Nope. This whole thing is nonsense. He says, writing off the whole thing. I'm writing off the whole process is ridiculous, which frees a lot of us to write off the bounds of norms and processes, like waiting until the president is criminally convicted in a court of law to say he's a criminal and felon. Well, yeah, you know what? I think that whole process is ridiculous. I dismiss it. I'm not going to read our laws or constitution. He's not going to read the transcripts. I'm not going to read the laws. I think we're on even footing there.
There you go.
Makes it a lot easier. It's very liberating. You should all try it. Okay. What else is occupying your time, or you see coming up for you or others, for that matter, or writing it on the front page? I know a lot. Who's got the read the transcripts beat? Is Mark?
Well, that's, of course, Mark, and Carrie gets in on it, too.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mark, thank goodness for Mark.
Yes.
He remembers everybody.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of players in this. He remembers everybody. He remembers all the key dates.
Excellent.
He can put it in context. The next new piece of breaking news out of the whole shebang, he can put it in context within seconds.
That is great.
And it's remarkable. And I'm really glad it's him and not me, because I look back at something I wrote a week ago and I don't remember it. So.
Well, it's hard to keep track of this, particularly the Ukrainians on this side. I very frequently find myself saying, well, wait a minute, was this Ukrainian for first thing, were they president or prime minister way back when? And between the similarities of the names, there are a few that are unique that I can remember, but otherwise I find myself always having to look them up and say, okay, this was the previous president. This is the one that got thrown out and he ran away to Russia. This is the one that is the prosecutor and is still around, but isn't the prosecutor general anymore.
And this is the foreign minister, and
Forget it. That's pretty remarkable to be able to keep track of all of them. Even the number of people on our side. It's easier to track their names, but still, just where did this guy come from?
Right.
It's difficult.
All of the underlings, all of the ambassadors, all of the emissaries. Yes.
Okay. Well, we'll be on the lookout for that. Is the Volcker transcript new today, or did it come out late yesterday? Or
I think it came out late yesterday.
That's why everybody was in Sondland yesterday, but not Volcker yet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and because Sondland was so minor bombshelly.
Yeah.
Oh, gee, I just recalled. My memory was just refreshed that.
That's the
Yeah,
way the
there
game
was
works.
quid pro quo in that call.
Yeah. It reminded me very much. My immediate go-to was the "Oh, you mean this gate key" thing.
Right.
Like, oh, it's that sort of admission. Okay. Yeah. I don't know what else to say about that one, but other than, well, okay, that's all out the window now. All of their defense of there being no quid pro quo is now gone, and it's just a matter of how hard will Republicans shut their eyes and scream, "I don't see it," or "I didn't hear you."
The part of it that remains kind of remarkable to me, and I don't know why at this point, because we've seen them, is how much power they are abrogating to Trump. The power of the purse. Like, the one main big thing the Congress has against the executive is the money.
Right.
And they're fine with Trump taking that away from them.
I guess.
Saying, oh, okay. I want this money to not go to, making our defense installments safer for the people who live and work there.
Yeah.
Let's put it toward the border wall.
Right.
I have this pot of money that Congress appropriated that they said is going to Ukraine. Well, I'm just going to play with it a little bit and not let them have it.
Yeah.
Until they do something for me. And Republicans in Congress are okay with that. They have no problem with that.
They are, and it's just there's no explaining it other than, well, if a Republican president does it, I'm okay with it. If a Democratic president did it, I would say it was impeachable. That's just the bottom line for them. They're going to do it again in the future. Next Democratic president, I promise you that there will be Republicans, and they'll point to
There are going to
Trump.
be articles of impeachment against the next Democratic president within weeks.
And they will pretend that it's in reaction to Trump. Well, you're the ones who said this was impeachable. Well, it is, and it always has been. Now, in this case, this president didn't do the thing you said, but if he had, it would be impeachable. But it was impeachable when George W. Bush did it. It's impeachable when everybody did it. But you guys ignore it every time it's a Republican, and then pretend to have discovered it and blame it on our having discovered it from your guy the next time you file your impeachment inquiries. All right, well, I mean, there's really no other explanation for it, but that when my friend does it, that is good. When my enemy does it, that is bad.
And this isn't new.
No.
I mean, I had a reminder of it this morning going through Twitter, see if I can find this again. A National Review, Andy McCarthy, is that his name?
I think you're right. Even though it's
argued, Andy McCarthy, best-selling author, contributing editor at National Review, and fellow at NR Institute, Fox News contributor, who argued in September of 2016 that that Hillary Clinton needed to be impeached, convicted, and disqualified from holding office so the voters wouldn't make her president.
Yes, that's right. Okay. I did see that circulate a while back. You should send, did you find that tweet from him? Or, okay, yeah, send that over if you will. I'll circulate that in the roundup too. But yeah, he was banking on the disqualification for holding federal office that's available as a remedy for impeachment, saying we'll block her ascension to the presidency. I guess he assumed that she would win the election.
Yes,
at that time,
and pre-impeach.
What was the charge? Was it a Benghazi thing, or does he even bother?
Probably. Yeah. I didn't read down the thread.
He may not
far enough to refresh my memory on that one, but
he may not have a charge. Just impeachment is what the House says it is, and we control the House, so say it is something, and then just get it done.
I'm gonna just toss this over to you.
Did no one say to
DMs?
him? Did no one say to him that they didn't have 2/3 of the Senate, and so therefore it was foolish for him to even consider? I'm curious how that got invented this year.
That's a very good question.
I can't understand why nobody brought that up for him. So, but probably, who knows? They just do what they do, and they write the crazy things that they write. And I'm more sympathetic to that position these days. I just say, you know what? I'm going to just start throwing things out. And they'll say, look at this crazy liberal who says these things. But if it gets circulated, it gets circulated. Okay. I won't use Daily Kost's platform to do it, but, you know, Twitter is a fine one, right? So I'll just start sending things out as I did yesterday. I use the bunny sign meme, so they never know whether or not to take it seriously. You know, as I said out yesterday, Donald J. Trump is not legitimately president. All right. We'll just start putting that out there. Well, why not? You know, you may be able to impeach him over Ukraine, but that doesn't mean he isn't legitimately president right now. I say he isn't.
There you go.
Not. And there's the proof, right? I can be on Fox TV now. That segment I watched yesterday where, what's his name? Steve Hilton, who I'd never heard of, was going on yesterday and saying, I can't even recall. Oh, yes, right. New Ukraine claims. I guess their new take on things was that, what was really happening is that both Biden and John Kerry, when he was Secretary of State, were funneling money to Ukraine in the form of aid, but really then leaning on the Ukrainian government that they should spend all of that aid money subsidizing Burisma, and then that Burisma was then turning that into a paycheck for Hunter Biden and John Kerry's former chief of staff. So that all the, as he said, billions and billions of dollars worth of aid, which we weren't sending to Ukraine, was in fact ending up in Hunter Biden's pocket because I said so. And then when they said, well, what's your proof for it? Right there on Fox, the other reporter saying, what's your proof? They said, aha, you must be in on it, asking me for proof. I just told you the proof. I said it was true.
Is the proof.
And if you disagree, you're part of the cover-up. All right. It's going to be awkward Thanksgiving this year. But
this is very show trial-ish, by the way. Mm-hmm. You know, if anybody's looking back to history to see how that worked.
Oh, yeah.
Stalin's show trials were kind of like Fox News. I said so.
Yeah, a little bit. You're right. I just said so. That's proof enough. I'm I guess at that point, a hero of the Soviet Union. How dare you ask me what my proof is? How
did that work out for him?
Yeah, not well. That's in the long run.
In the long run, it did take a while, which is kind of disquieting.
Yeah, millions died. Sad trombone, I guess. I don't know. So hopefully we won't get to that point. I do see in other news, not much attention yet being paid to it, but Roger Stone has had his trial begin. I guess they're in jury selection.
I just saw tweets out of that, and it looked like a total circus.
That's what it sounded like. And he left the proceedings. They haven't begun the trial part yet. They're just selecting jury. But I guess with food poisoning, he claimed.
That's what they call it, yeah.
Like, I guess that can happen, but it seems
unless the Russians got to him.
Right. We poisoned his food. That's right. He's absolutely correct. So I don't know. We'll see whether he shows up today. I don't know whether proceedings have started there yet. I don't know. Anything else on the horizon besides just fielding things as they come?
That's unfortunately what our new life has been like a lot.
Yes.
But it'll be fun on the way. Hunter's riding. That's always fun.
True.
We're going to talk about Obamacare enrollment because it's that time again.
Okay.
And that's something to talk about with all your friends.
Yeah, still exists.
And whether or not we're going to have a government shutdown, either now or before Christmas.
Yes.
Lots of fun things going on out there.
I see that they're scrambling to distance themselves from the idea. I don't know if anybody believes it or not. Is that what you're seeing? The White House putting out word that we're not interested.
It all depends on Trump and how mad he is over impeachment.
Yeah, I mean,
It's right down to it, and whether Mitch McConnell can exert any control over him at all.
all right. Well, we'll see whether
Mitch doesn't want a government shutdown. So
no, I imagine he would not want that, and Trump can see the reason why he wouldn't want it either. But that can change on a dime, any time.
because he's not mentally stable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line of it. Okay. Well, we'll leave it. We're out of time. We'll have to leave it there. He may or may not be mentally unstable, but you heard it here. Not even necessarily first. He's mentally unstable. We're out of time, and we'll just have to debate it another time. Thanks very much, Joan. I appreciate your coming by. You must be a little bit tired. I don't know if you stayed up late to get the results yesterday, but the hectic pace of Daily Kos. Appreciate your giving your time to us. We'll talk to you again next week.
You are most welcome. Talk to you next week.
Take
From
care.
Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show.
With David Waldman.
Well, what could there possibly be left to talk about? Well, that's Justice Putnam's job. That's the hard one. I don't have the answers to that. He does. But I'll give you some idea of what's happening around the world, as he usually does. Boris Johnson has withheld a government report on Russian meddling to avoid devastating revelations about Brexit. We got to pay some attention to that. He does next.